What's going on at Tottenham, Grimmy?
What a loaded question that is. I mean, we've been asking that question for about 4 or 5 weeks, I think, and no one can seem to give a straight answer. And I watched the game against Leicester, and I've got no idea. They can't seem to score goals. They can't seem to defend. They can't really seem to do a whole lot else. Yeah, it's just bizarre. I mean, I know they've got injuries. Like, I'm not discrediting the injuries they've got, but even so, against a Leicester team who were looking under pressure, and Van Nistelrooy was looking under pressure heading into this weekend, and he's got a win and probably taking it all off him straight away. So Spurs at the minute are the team you probably want to play based on the form, but it should be the complete opposite based on some of the results they've had this season, like when they went away to City and how they've played against some of the bigger teams. But yeah, it is bizarre.
It is a bizarre run, as you say, Grimmy. They do have injuries. I know Dominic Solanke's out for 6 weeks, and they've got a few issues. I think the Richarlison substitution was booed because basically they don't really have any attacking players. Well, Mikey Moore, I think, on the bench at the minute, but there's still enough in that team that should be doing the job. It's obviously building pressure on Ange. We will talk about that. We'll talk about that too. But Toby, we'll come on to you. How is it feeling at the moment as a Spurs fan? Is there a lot of negativity, I presume, around the club?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we're just so bored and sick to death of losing football matches. And I think it rubs it in more when it's a poor, with all due respect, Ruud van Nistelrooy Leicester side. Like, we shouldn't be losing at home to them. It's just so frustrating. And it's the manner of the defeats as well. It's just, we've been so spineless, and yeah, it's not pretty at the moment. And I think the fans, there's a lot of unrest, and I think the majority are now leaning towards Ange out. I think it's going to be a very toxic environment if we don't win on Thursday night in the Europa League, and then we don't go and get any points away at Brentford, which is looking like a very tough fixture, as it always is going away to Brentford. But yeah, it's very toxic at the moment.
It certainly is. It certainly is. The fans are not happy, and understandable with that run. It's seen Tottenham kind of plummet down the league, and are worryingly looking over their shoulder now a little bit, because teams below them as well picking up kind of a bit of form, and losses to Leicester certainly don't help. What in terms of the game against Leicester went wrong for you?
It all went wrong, to be fair. I think just the conceding goals back to back, like how quick the second one come after the first one. I think that was just the mentality, just how, we looked vulnerable after Vardy scored that first one. I think the second one, it was coming. It's just the mentality shift, and I think obviously it doesn't help that we've got no players at the minute. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of our injuries are down to Ange in the first place, which I think is the frustrating thing. I think obviously every team gets injuries, but the amount we've got is just, honestly, it's an absolute crisis. But it's just frustrating because I think, the way Van der Ven and Romero got injured in November against Chelsea, that was on the manager rushing them back. They weren't ready to play, and that's ultimately cost us a lot of points throughout December and now. And yeah, I think it's probably going to end up costing him his job.
Yeah, it's a good point on the injuries, because particularly that Chelsea game, bringing both centre-backs back at that point, rushing them in, and Van der Ven's got quite a history of hamstring issues, isn't he? Hamstring and knee issues. I was looking at his record today. I think he's had about 5 or 6 separate instances of those injuries in the past sort of 3 years. So it certainly needs to be managed carefully coming back. And this sort of high push football is not going to help. I was looking at some stats today as well with Postecoglu. So he's now 61 games that they've had, 98 goals conceded. That's an average of 1.6 per game conceded, compared to Mourinho and Conte. Mourinho had 1.2 and Conte 1.1. And Mourinho left in 7th place and Conte was 6th at that point. Conte even had a better goals scored ratio, which didn't kind of, at that point, the narrative was boring football, wasn't it? Is it looking like, and Grimmy will know I'm coming up with this pun, so prepare yourself, Grimmy, but is it looking like job Im-Postecoglu for Ange?
I think it is. I think I'm not sure how he gets so much like leeway, whereas Conte and obviously he didn't get the same, and he was performing a lot better than we are now. I think as Spurs fans, we're sick of changing managers, but where we are genuinely, I don't think we will for the record, but we are genuinely in a position where we are vulnerable to relegation. I think obviously for a club of our size and the money we've spent in the last few years, especially, it's obviously not good enough. It's atrocious, really. So yeah, I think he is a bit of a fraud, to be fair. And I think obviously it takes a lot for me to turn against a manager because I just want to back him. I want to back a manager when they come to the club. I don't want to get switch managers every 10 minutes. But it's got to the point where I think it's hard to back him, and I have lost a lot of faith. And it was only the Leicester game where I was like, yeah, he has to go now. I was on the edge, but that was too much for me.
Yeah, the Leicester one's a really, really, really bad one with the form that they're in at home. That's kind of inexcusable, isn't it? With, as you said, injuries, there are other narratives to it, but that's just a really, really bad result. I mean, is it? Where's the sort of split at the minute you seeing with yourself? Because I know there's a lot on the fan base that are very Levy out. I think Graham's asked a question there. Levy out, Ange out. I mean, obviously Levy's been there a long time now, and it's kind of a cycle that happens. Are people more 50-50 split, or are they pushing for Ange out more?
I think it's a weird one because I think most people I speak to are very heavy Levy out. I think obviously it is on Levy to a certain extent. Like, well, we know the injury crisis we're in. We've signed 0 outfield players this window. What have we got now? A few days left of the window. Was it Monday it officially shuts?
Yeah.
Either way, we don't have anything unless it's going on behind the scenes that looks like it's going to materialise the next few days. And it's just not really acceptable. So I think the split is, I think everyone, well, not everyone, but I think the majority of people are very anti-Levy. I think a lot of people are Ange and Levy out at the same time, if that works. But yeah, I'd say that's probably 80% of the fan base that I sort of see from, hear from, speak to are Levy out.
I think, yeah, that, and I think there's lots of questions, isn't there, over recruitment and a lot of issues that have kind of been happening with the club. Graham's come to say this is a brilliant stat here. So a stat yesterday that Spurs had more points last year after 10 games than they have this season so far, which is incredible. Obviously, that incredible start that Ange had last season definitely contributed to that. But is there I think this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, even the sort of media are saying it, but relegation, Toby, is there any worry or threat or whatsoever? I mean, in theory, that squad shouldn't be anywhere near it, but the reality is it's 8 points now, isn't it, to the zone?
I think there is a genuine worry, but I think the only reason we're going to be all right is because I think there are 3 teams worse than us, and Leicester being one of them, even though they beat us. I think Saints, Southampton, I think they're poor. I think they're going to go down, and I think that will probably keep us in the division, the fact that there's teams worse than us. But if you look at our next 8 fixtures, they don't look very friendly at all. And I think genuinely it's going to be a lot closer than people think. But I think we will be all right ultimately. It is a genuine worry though.
Yeah, it's definitely got them well out of, I mean, saying those last 2 managers, we said, Mourinho and Conte, both when they left you were still in European competitions. Those places would have got you into the Europa and Conference Leagues those season. And so it's been a lot of frustrating results for Tottenham for sure. Grimmy, we'll come over to you in terms of with generally on the Spurs situation. I know we've asked this a lot. When, if the axe is going to fall on Ange, do you think the Liverpool Cup game is the one thing that's still they're waiting to see what happens there? Because that does change the narrative a bit with Tottenham and a trophy, doesn't it, if they make a cup final?
Yeah, I mean, I think Liverpool's part of it, but I also think that you've got the Europa League as well. FA Cup's a bit more difficult because you've got Villa away. So if you can somehow get past Villa, then you're making a good cup run there as well. So maybe the Liverpool game is what they're holding on to, but they've got rid of managers 5 days before a cup final before, so I don't necessarily think that's maybe part of the thinking. The only thing I can make an argument for is the amount of injuries he's had, because even if you look at this weekend, Richarlison going off early because he wasn't fit enough to play the full 90 minutes and he didn't have any other options on the bench. So it's kind of like, if he hasn't got players to play with, essentially, and it's that situation, like he's kind of fighting with one hand tied behind his back. I know we've got other teams who are doing well who have injuries, but again, with Spurs, it seems like a lot of their injuries have been to key players. I mean, Romero and Van der Ven, if they're not playing in central defence, it's a pretty open Spurs unit, and they're open at the best of times, even when it's a full strength squad. So, yeah, I think the only thing that's maybe helping him is the fact that there is maybe circumstances that Levy and Co can maybe argue with and say it's been a rough season in that regard. So that's why maybe we're having a bit of a poorer standard. But again, they've got the next 3 league games are Brentford, United, and Ipswich. And I feel like if they go lose those 3 or 2 in the first 2, even, I think he's probably gone, regardless of what happens with Liverpool.
I think you're right. Looking at those 3, and obviously as we know where Manchester United are, that's a game that they'll see as a winnable. And we saw how bonkers the cup game was only a few weeks ago. So they'll look at that. Ipswich, Brentford away. I mean, Brentford's been a tough place to go all season, but somewhere Spurs have got to pick up points. Heather said could see them ending 14th, 15th though. I mean, I think the problem is that there's teams that are. You said there's 3. I agree with you, Tom. There's definitely 3 worst teams in terms of the league, and I think relegation's not. But then you look at the teams above, and you're starting to see teams like Palace putting little runs together. West Ham have got a new manager. That's a little bounce coming. United are a little bit ahead. Can they do a little bit more? And you're starting to think, well, where are these teams at Tottenham going to pull in if you can't see any consistency? Do you think it's just a case, Toby, if you get some of the players back, that would be enough to give you that kick in?
Yeah, I think once we get the centre-backs back, I think that will make a massive difference because Dragassin's he's not good enough. And we've been playing, and credit to him because he's done excellent, Archie Gray, who is not a centre-back. This is his first season of Premier League football. And we've been playing Porro, fullback, who excellent going forward, but defensively, there's a lot of work to do there. But I think, once we get the centre-backs back, I think we should start picking up points in games that you would expect us to win a bit more. I don't think we'll be outstanding, but I don't think we'll be as poor as we are now.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Sorry.
So that's right. A couple might sort of help in terms of given the positivity. I'd agree with Heather. It's not really an excuse for Bournemouth having a striker right back, but I think the point trying to make here really is that you're in a downturn of form, aren't you? You're in struggling, and sometimes you just need a spark of something. Bournemouth situation is complete. They're doing fantastic without the players that they've got, but they're riding a very good season. And Tottenham is a toxic, negative arena at the moment, and need to find something to give them that kind of positive to move forward.